So I'm pretty sure this video is going to bomb, but I just can't keep silent anymore, guys. I've been stewing on this for a couple of weeks at this point, and I honestly just need to get it off my chest. Look, one of the incredible things about the 3D printing community, without a doubt, is the collaborative and open source nature. The fact that most of the consumer software and firmware, a lot of the hardware, and literally millions upon millions of models are all completely free for personal or sometimes even commercial use. That's absolutely awesome. It's mind-blowing, actually, that in our little corner of the internet, we've created a culture where people contribute so much of their hard work and talent towards creating things that all of us can use and enjoy. I absolutely love that. But with that said, as I've gone deeper and deeper into this community, say with more complex build of more advanced projects, I've come to notice what I personally feel is a major issue holding back our beloved little community and our hobby. The people at the forefront, the ones moving us forward with the real innovations that the rest of the industry later adopts, those people are not being compensated for their work. Now look, I get it. We got to where we are because of open source ideas, which, because of the way that open source works, require that future developments on top of those ideas also be open source. I'm not advocating for a change to that kind of policy. I know that it's the reason that consumer 3D printing has come as far as it has in recent years, and I know that decisions from people like Joseph Prusa early on, who managed to somehow balance running a commercial enterprise and still supporting the open source community, are a big part of this great thing that we all have. But when even Joseph Prusa himself, the poster boy for open hardware and the man behind one of the most successful companies in the industry, is writing blog posts questioning the future viability of open source as a business model, I think that's cause for concern. And as with all injustice the world over, it's always the little guy who gets hit the hardest. For example, the Voron project is already very big, with tons of volunteer manpower and corporate donations. They're so big that they choose to turn down lucrative percentage deals from manufacturers. But I'm really only using Voron as an example throughout this video. This video is really about all those smaller, up-and-coming open source projects behind them. See, since starting this channel, I've had the privilege of building relationships with some incredible developers and engineers and designers. People working on all kinds of projects, from entire 3D printers to tool changer systems, multi-material systems, firmware, software, slicers. Some of these projects are still very niche and they're lesser known. But some of them, like orcaslicer, have literally become the market leader. And yet, invariably, when I talk to those people, many of whom have become personal friends over time, they confide in me that they aren't able to commit to this work that they are so passionate about and which benefits the community so much, on a full-time basis. Now sure, some of them probably don't want to. They have a day job that they love, and they view their contributions to this community as a fun after-hours hobby or a learning experience. But many, many others, I've come to find out, have families or children on the way, and they dream of turning their passion into their profession if only they could justify it. Now this pisses me off for a couple of reasons. First of all, it frustrates me because I think to myself, how much faster could this project progress if this person or even a team of people were able to devote their full attention to it? How many of those orcaslicer ideas and pull requests could get done if there were 2 full-time developers working on the project? Prusa Slicer, for example, didn't become the world's leading slicer by coincidence. It did so because Prusa's business model of selling printers affords them the ability to keep something like 13 full-time developers on their staff. They took an open source project, Slick3R, integrated it into a profitable business model of selling printers and filament, and we're all the richer for it. But what if someone like SoftFever, the developer of orcaslicer, doesn't want to build a huge business selling hardware? What happens then? The other reason that this whole thing pisses me off is just on a philosophical and a moral level. Volunteering and contributing to a community is great. It's laudable. It's noble. But when you actually assemble and use some of these projects, like I recently did with the ercf v2, you really start to understand just the sheer amount of work that must go into designing some of them. We're talking months or years, hundreds or even thousands of hours. And that far exceeds what could reasonably be considered volunteer work. This isn't uploading 1 or 2 cool designs to printables for everyone to enjoy free. These are living, breathing projects that are constantly being improved. And for those among you who are happy to do all of this out of the kindness of your own hearts as a fun hobby or as a learning challenge, well, hey, good on you, and thank you so much for your contributions. But personally, and feel free to call me a greedy capitalist here, I've always believed in the idea that when it comes to work, especially work that goes on to create tangible or even commercial value for others, nobody, not even the most entry-level inexperienced intern, should be working for free. These people are paying and working for free just to create stuff for the rest of us. And that's noble and all, but if they want to earn a living, then they should. I mean, even people working in nonprofit organizations deserve to earn a salary for their work. It's not like this in every corner of the community though. There are designers on Patreon who, despite actually also uploading most of their designs for free on other platforms, are earning 5 to 6 figures a month designing things like tabletop miniatures, toys, cosplay props, mechanical marvels. And that is awesome. I'm super happy for them. But when it comes to the software and hardware that we're all using to actually print those designs, yeah, the people behind that are still working day jobs to pay the bills. And again, that just doesn't seem right to me. Imagine a future for this community where each of these projects, from Klipper and Mainsail to Orcaslicer, the Enraged Rabbit project, Spartacus, 8-track, stealthchanger, and 100 other projects that we haven't yet heard of, all had a small team of just 1 or even 2 people devoting their full attention to their respective projects. I wonder how many innovations we would have that we wouldn't otherwise get. How much faster would those innovations come to fruition? And how much happier might those people be if their passion became their profession instead of something that they only have time to do on nights and weekends at the expense of family time? Look, we content creators, we actually have it at least relatively easy. YouTube pays us ad revenue whenever you watch our videos for free. For normal videos, sponsors pay us to feature their products at no cost to you. We can share affiliate links or create merch like this to earn a little extra revenue on the side. And because we're not building on open source designs, we can do things like offer exclusive content or our printer profiles and filament profiles on Patreon to drive subscriptions there. Not everyone is able to make the content creation thing work. It's not easy, and even for those of us who are able to make it work, it's not big bucks. Trust me, none of us are getting rich over here. But it is enough to sustain a handful of us and allow us to continue creating content for all of you full time. But what about the people actually developing the open source projects that we're all creating content about? GitHub isn't paying them anything when you look at or download their models. And while the bigger projects like the Voron team are definitely getting parts for free to test with, because these projects generally don't have their own audiences, I doubt that sponsors are lining up to pay them for advertising. And unfortunately, you can't pay a mortgage or childcare expenses with filament and stepper motors. Trust me, I've tried. And just so you don't think that I'm holier than thou or that I'm virtue signaling here, know that I am just as guilty as any of us in this regard. I've built, 3 vorons, 2 multi-material systems. I'm currently working on a 7-headed tool changer. I use orcaslicer every single day, and I'm currently setting up Happy Hair among a dozen other softwares that I use. And yet I'm ashamed to admit that up until this week, as I was thinking about this problem and the video that I could make about it, only up until this week, I had made no donations. I think I donated $5 in the past to Gina from Octoprint. So I have some thoughts on how we as a community can do better and how we can maybe attempt to right what I hope you'll agree feels like a wrong. Not just for the ethical reasons, but also to ensure that we have the best and brightest people giving these projects their full attention, despite the fact that many of them are standing on the open source shoulders of giants. I mean, there's a certain amount of hypocrisy in the fact that many people in the community love to accuse companies like Bamboo Lab of taking inspiration from the open source community without respecting the open source ethos, but then people are somehow surprised when a for-profit company with patents and tens of millions of dollars in venture capital is able to somehow dramatically outpace the innovation of a handful of unpaid volunteers moonlighting in their garages. It's not surprising. So where do we even begin in fixing this? Well, I think the first step involves a cultural change, and that's why I wanted to make this video. When people join our community, they get indoctrinated in a culture that is, in my opinion, a little too comfortable taking without giving. There are millions and millions and millions of free models. The software, it's all free. The designs are all open source. All that is great, especially in the case of students or retirees or people who don't have the means to pay. None of that should change. But the more I thought about this, the more the word stigma kept coming up in my mind. Like, technically, most of the museums in London are free to the public. You can go for free, totally acceptable. And yet there is a stigma associated with walking right past the donation counter. Or how about street performers? They play beautiful music on the street and it is 100% completely for free. You should enjoy it for free and feel no obligation to pay for it. But there is a social stigma associated with standing in front of the same street performer for 15 minutes and filming a bunch of video clips that you're going to upload to social media without at least leaving a tip. Of course, I'm not advocating publicly shaming people, and people should never feel pressured to donate or contribute if they don't see the value in a given project. But I do think that there should be just a little bit of an embarrassing taboo around, say, building half a dozen vorons like myself without donating to the voron project itself. Or people who, again, like myself, have dozens of printers loaded in orcaslicer but have never taken the time to support its development. I mean, if you can afford all the parts or all the printers, you can afford to support the project itself with a few bucks. So I really think we just need to change that culture and the expectations around that culture. Like, for example, what if every time someone posts a new serial request to get a serial number on their voron, it becomes something of a faux pas to do so without sharing a screenshot of your $2 donation to the Voron Project PayPal? Or what if in the Discord channels for some of these smaller projects, supporters got a different role and a different color on their username so that it would apply some social pressure to those asking questions without having that role or that color because they haven't supported the project. It's just an idea. Now, the same goes for manufacturers. Sobel recently made waves by publicly committing to and then following through with a $2 donation to the Voron project for every single SV08 they sold. They did this not because they had to. I mean, the open source license means that any company could create even an exact replica of the 2.4 and sell it with zero obligations. They did it because it's the right thing to do and because they want to see the continued innovation that will benefit everyone, including themselves. But what about all the other companies making Voron kits or replicas? There are already some examples of companies doing the right thing here. LDO, for example, makes a monthly donation to the Voron project, and that is fantastic. What about all the rest of them? And what about all the printers running Klipper, or mainsail, or Fluid? I know that Big Tree Tech, Obico, and Peopoly are donating to Klipper, but considering that there are literally millions of printers shipping every year running Klipper now, and there are only 500 consumer-level supporters at $3 a pop on Patreon supporting Klipper, there should really be more logos on this page. Or what about the plethora of printers that are now shipping with orcaslicer profiles as a default? Even if it means increasing the price of these products by like $2 or $5, I'd really like to see more manufacturers doing this. Frankly, I'd much rather see many of these companies who somehow are paying their own staff developers to build their own slicers, which are honestly never really that good. I'd much rather they take that money and funnel it into the orcaslicer project and just give up on this whole idea of having their own slicer. Honestly, orcaslicer is way better anyways. I'd also like to see companies be much more public and transparent about it, right on their sales pages. That way we as consumers can know that by purchasing, say, a Voron 2.4 kit from LDO, we've already contributed back to the Voron, mainsail, orcaslicer, and Fluid development teams to fund the continued development. There's quite a bit of precedent for this model working elsewhere. There are plenty of massively successful open source projects out there, from Blender to Linux, Tor, Mozilla, and many, many more. And most of them are funded largely by corporate sponsors. So I think that in addition to the consumer level stigma that we need to create, we should be expecting companies to be much more public about how much they are donating to which projects for which products they use them, and how that relates to the overall number of units they're selling. And I know that this sounds harsh, but I do think we should stigmatize companies who are notably missing from those supporter pages. And finally, designers, engineers, developers, you guys aren't without fault either here. Look, I get it. The culture and the history of this community is such that it can be really, really uncomfortable asking for money. But that's something that honestly needs to change. No, I'm not advocating that you eschew the values of open source and put your designs behind a paywall. But I do think that most of these projects could make a handful of changes that would in turn dramatically increase the amount of money flowing in, and therefore your ability to actually develop those or even make the switch to full-time. You could, for example, set up a Patreon community for projects like Voron, ercf, orcaslicer, and so on, where you host members-only live streams, give early access to new features or designs, useful tools like interactive spreadsheets to plan your build, or exclusive members-only versions of individual parts which have supporter badges imprinted in them, so that a supporter's build would be identifiably different from others. Sure, the main project must and should remain open source if it's based on other open source projects. But what about putting exclusive tutorial videos, configuration tools, or behind-the-scenes updates behind a paywall? I don't see anything wrong with that. Alternatively, you could put a slider, a progress bar right on the GitHub, next to the donation page link, directly letting people know how much it's going to cost to keep developing the next version of your project, including a breakdown of expenses, such as hardware, filament for testing, salaries, and all that. That way, we can tangibly see that you are not earning enough to continue developing the project that we're all eagerly awaiting. You could even put a suggested donation on your project's GitHub. Again, going back to the whole idea of stigma. You could say like, this project is 100% free and open source, but in order to help us continue developing and improving it, the suggested donation, if you plan to build one, is $7. Is that so bad? Though, honestly, for some of these projects, even adding a donation button to begin with would be a huge improvement. I'm looking at you, ERCF team. You could also create merch. I mean, I, for one, would totally buy some Voron or ERCF t-shirts. Though, again, the Voron project, specifically at its size, isn't really the type of project that I think need the help most. So, ERCF t-shirts, anyone? Heck, you could even just put up Amazon wish lists of the hardware and filament you need so that members of the community could at least buy that stuff for you. But again, as I feel like I've said twice or 3 times, filament and stepper motors don't pay the bills. That's why ultimately the biggest change that designers in this community need to make is one of mindset. You guys have to be more comfortable asking people to support you and your work, and be safe in the knowledge that you are creating something of tremendous value and you deserve to be compensated for it if you want to be. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. When I opened up to this community nearly 2 years ago and let them know that I dreamt of going full-time on this, but I just couldn't justify it, people stepped up. People subscribed, they liked, they commented, they watched, they recommended and shared my videos. Some of them chose to support me on Patreon. Others made a point to use my affiliate links. And in no time whatsoever, you guys, made it possible for me to not only do this full-time, but to rent a full studio where I can continue creating higher quality, free content for all of you. Again, content creators have it a little bit different, but there's no reason that it shouldn't be true for designers. And if you look at Gina from Octoprint, she's a great example. It probably wasn't very comfortable putting a big animated drop-down banner asking for money on the Octoprint homepage. But at the time of this recording, Gina has over 5,000 paying members across platforms, which has allowed her to keep developing her project full-time comfortably. And we all benefit as a result. So designers, please stop suffering in silence and ask yourselves, what could you be doing differently to incentivize people to support your work and also change this stigma? How can you find a way to make it comfortable asking the community for whatever it is you need? And how can you show us the tangible benefits to us and to the wider community as a whole if you actually got that support? And by the way, we should all make sure to reward that behavior. We all love this hobby and none of us are trying to get rich off of it. We're truly in this because we love it. But open source ethos or not, people deserve to be paid for their work. And if we, as a community, want to see the next generation of open source projects we use and love thrive, rather than just see closed source companies building on top of them, we need to make it possible for the people actually developing those projects to devote their full attention to them, if they so desire. But hey, I'd love to hear what all of you think, so let's start a dialogue down below. I read every single comment, and I do try to respond to as many of them as possible. Also, in the description below, I am going to share some links where you can donate to some of the popular or up-and-coming projects that you're probably already using or might want to use. In the interest of being the cultural change that we wish to see in the community, it would actually be really, really cool if you guys shared in the comments and let us know which ones of those different projects you chose to donate to. That's all for this week, but I'll see all of you on the next layer.